Hi YouTube. This is my first time ever doing a YouTube video, blogging, vlogging, whatever you want to call it. So I'm just kind of taking a chance. So no judgments on my movements, edits, anything like that. I just wanted to share my story. I've been looking up just different videos based on a recent injury that I got and thought it may be helpful actually to share my experience and just use this forum to kind of openly talk about it, share some, I think, frustrations that I've gone through, share my experiences, because I've found that it's really helpful just to have a community and people you can relate to as you're doing your own research. The overall purpose today is, maybe as you can see from the title, is I want to share not only about the recent Achilles injury that I just, not just, but I'm currently going through, but also kind of how it relates to that this is my third major injury that I've experienced playing basketball in the past, I guess you can say 7 years. So I wanted to provide that perspective. Also, as a woman who's actually in her 20s, I'm currently 26, I'll be 27 this year. So sharing, how I'm going through this injury as compared to a lot of men that I've seen who are mostly in their 30s that have experienced this injury. So I also wanted to provide that viewpoint as well. And then I'm currently going the non-surgery route as well. So sharing the experience and the thoughts and the up and downs that I'm currently just facing it and making decisions as I'm going through it. So that's kind of overall what I want to share with you and just kind of take you through that experience for myself. So let me just start out by giving a bit of background on how it happened. So I had decided to go ahead and play in a co-ed basketball league. I am currently a very active person, love to play sports, all different types of sports, basketball, tennis, working out. I've played volleyball, so I like to stay active. I've also played flag football as well. But this was actually my first time since I've moved to DC, which is in the past 4 years, actually playing in a competitive league. I played a few pickup games here and there. It was the first game actually of the season. And I think I have probably the typical experience that happened that a lot of other people have endured, where I was in the game. I just did kind of a change in motion to go back to get the ball for someone that was inbounding it, and I felt that instant kind of snap pop, like someone had stepped on the back of my calf or ankle area really, really hard. I didn't necessarily hear a pop, but I kind of felt a pop, and almost like a huge cramp was moving through my calf, like a tennis ball sized cramp that I describe it as. And kind of went down from there, was not able to walk off the court on my own. I had to get people to help me off the court. Of course, I was not able to play for the rest of the game from there, and I just kind of sat there with my leg elevated. So initially after that had happened, I had never experienced, like I said, really anything like this specific injury. So I was like, wow, maybe I just, strained like my Achilles or calf muscle really hard. Maybe it's a really bad ankle roll. I was just, anything but something serious that required, or that would be a tear. So that night, after the game was over, I was quite far from my home, just where the facility was. So I actually drove home that night. I had the injury on my right foot. So hindsight 2020, not a good idea, but I was just thinking I have to get home. Maybe it's not that bad. I mean, I don't really have much motion in my ankle area, but I'll make it. So I opted not to go to the emergency room that night. I think I was just coming down off of adrenaline from everything that had happened, just trying to figure out, what could this injury really be? I chose really not to do a lot of internet research because I obviously know that, that can get you psyched out. I'll think I have one thing and it's another. So I said, I'll just kind of, I really won't do any of that type of research. So the next day I decided to go to urgent care. I did call an orthopedic at first. They weren't going to be able to see me that day or even the next day at that time. So I just wanted to get in, at least get an initial diagnosis of what was going on. So I went to urgent care, and from there, the doctor kind of looked at it. She didn't really want to make an official diagnosis because there was no sports doctor. She speculated that it could be the calf muscle potentially, or the Achilles. She asked if I could stand up on my toes. I indicated no, I couldn't. And obviously I had some swelling. So she gave me some crutches, some ibuprofen, I think at the time, to help with the swelling, and had recommended that she could wait until the sports doctor was able to come, but that wasn't going to be until almost a week later or a few days later. I just didn't want to wait that long. So I kind of said, okay, we'll see if we can schedule the appointment. But in my mind, I already had it that I was going to be following up with an actual orthopedic. This was just the first steps. So went home, kind of skipping through a bit of the story, but I ended up scheduling an appointment with an orthopedic. So the injury happened on a Monday, June 17th. And by Wednesday, I was able to see an orthopedic surgeon. So I went to the orthopedic, set up an appointment. They initially took an x-ray. I think this is just kind of first steps protocol. Maybe it has something to do with the insurance, just to do tests, I think, to rule out, to make sure it's not the bone. So then after going through that, the doctor came in and saw me, had me lay on my stomach, I think did what they call the Thompson test. So basically testing to see if my ankle area was reactive to calf pressure. He did a lot of pressing and pushing on that muscle, which I was like, ouch, 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 this is hurt. It's very tender after it happens. But from there, he was able to determine that it was a rupture. So from there, honestly, I think I mentally somewhat blacked out because I just could not believe that I had just endured a very, very serious athletic injury. So I will pause there to say kind of maybe why there's this background on how in shock I was in the feeling of receiving that diagnosis. So as I mentioned before, I do consider myself an athlete, very active, love to participate in sports, and basketball has been the main sport that has been my passion. So back in high school, I experienced actually two kind of major injuries, which were ACL tears. So I have torn both my left ACL and my right ACL, which happened about a year and a half apart. So my sophomore year, playing basketball, coming down the court on the right side, going up for a layup, someone kind of came to not take the ball away, but just in basketball, just both kind of going for the ball and me going up for the layup, and boom, it happened, right ACL tear. So went through, and I also had a meniscus tear as well. So had to get the surgery for that and do the rehabilitation process, 6 months to a year. They usually always say, from my experience, it takes longer, just not only with the physical rehabilitation, but the mental rehabilitation as well. Trusting your muscles, trusting your body, trusting that the surgery has worked in a sense and your muscles have built back up. So went through that rehabilitation process, spent the latter half of my junior year really still kind of recovering, but I said, hey, senior year, I'm going to be ready to go. I really will have that confidence. I still wore a knee brace on my right knee just as getting that strength back. So comes around to my senior year, a scrimmage, not even the first game of the season, and I'm in the game. Similar situation on the left side, kind of actually, I think by myself, again, going up for a layup, go down on my left side. I didn't really want to think of what had happened. It couldn't be it. It couldn't have happened again. This is first game. It did end up being that I also ended up tearing my left ACL, spraining the MCL, and tore some of the meniscus as well. So a real downer, was not able to play in my senior year season. So that's kind of the summary of my injuries, just as background. And so I did actually, when I went to college, I did participate actually in club basketball. As you'll see, obviously, I love the game. I love being active. I still wanted to keep playing. I did not have any injuries, no significant injuries as I played club in college. I did not play a full 4 years, but I was pretty active for about a year and a half, and then actually ended up playing some club tennis as well. So I still wore a knee brace on my right knee, still knowing in the back of my mind, obviously I had these two pretty serious injuries. Obviously your ACL is needed to kind of do your cutting back and forth. So just being cautious of those injuries. So fast forwarding again back to the diagnosis of the Achilles rupture. So the reason that I say I somewhat blacked out mentally is because hearing that this had happened, obviously I've heard, I follow sports, so hearing about other major athletes that had torn their Achilles. Obviously, Kevin Durant, majorly in the news from being in the finals, went down for his. I know the recovery time, the process. As an athlete, you really and truly do not come back the same from injuries unless you're a professional athlete with professional people that can do your physical therapy and be on you 24/7. So I think I was just more devastated than anything to hear this news. It was my first game, so obviously that just brung back a lot of emotions of like, wow, I'm just starting the season, things are really going well, and I just, once again, I couldn't even get a grasp, a good feel, because I've just experienced another injury. So anyway, I got the diagnosis of the ruptured Achilles. So at the time, the doctor shared both options of surgery and the non-surgical route. And so I think in my mind, because I have already experienced the 2 ACL tears, which required surgery, I wouldn't consider that type of injury as really a non-surgical option. I mean, you could, but it's usually highly recommended that you get that. So he presented both and said, it's 50-50 in terms of the results of whether people go surgery or non-surgery. But I think I mostly had in my mind at this point, like, why would I want to put something together non-surgically? How can it really ever get better if it's actually not stitched or sewn together? And so I was, and by that point I had in my mind that I would probably go with the surgery, but I wasn't willing to make a decision at that point just because I needed time to think about it, process it, really just kind of have reflections of what is actually happening. All some different circumstances now. I mean, I have a full-time job. I have, my insurance, so cost to consider in this process, time off of work. What am I looking to do in the next kind of years, just athletically? What do I want to get back to being? Is it time to really assess playing? Just so many questions that were going through my head. So I said, I'm not willing to make a decision about this today. So he put me in like a soft splint, essentially, nothing hard or casting, kind of somewhat in that plantar flex motion, and sent me on my way and said, I'll see you in a week. So a week passes, I go back to the follow-up appointment, and he takes the splint off and says, it's already growing back together really well. I don't even feel as much of the gap, I guess, that they describe usually when you have a torn Achilles. Essentially, you'll feel your Achilles bone for, about a few centimeters, and then you'll feel this big gap, and then you'll feel it again. So that gap is usually the rupture space. So what he was indicating was that, it was actually starting to grow back together really well. And so he recommended non-surgery. So this really kind of threw me for a loop. I was already preparing in my mind, like, surgery is needed to repair this injury. I personally did not do a lot, like I said, of background research, just for me personally, because one, I think it was just such a sensitive spot. I knew if I looked it up, I would just see all of these for lack of better words, devastating statistics or just research on it. It takes this amount of time. You don't come back the same. These are the options. I mean, I did kind of the preliminary research of, just what it is, how it happens, things of that nature. But I didn't really dig that deep into the studies. But I didn't know that there were two routes. So hearing that, that he actually was recommending the non-surgery was a surprise to me. And again, personally, as an athlete, I was like, no, why would I choose to go a non-surgical route? I always make the comparison. It's like putting a paper clip around some papers instead of stapling them. Of course, you want the staple. That gives more of a sense of security. But in comparison, this seems to, not in comparison, but this is different, this tendon, than in how the ACL, which is a ligament, grows back together. So I had to kind of stop doing that constant comparison in my mind that these are similar and they require surgery. It seems that the Achilles does have the ability essentially to, if you put it together, form, grow back essentially, and then you work on doing the rehabilitation around that. So again, I was still just kind of unsure about what the best route was at that point, but I kind of needed essentially to make a decision, because it's either, you start the casting right away, and then I have seen some news articles, research that says, a lot of times people will get the surgery right after it happens to really start that process. But overall, the rehabilitation process is the same. And I also know this from experience, it's all about the physical therapy. So no matter what, input equals output. So however much strength training you want to put in to, even, of course, the therapist is going to give you exercises. Most of the time, you're only going to physical therapy 2 or 3 times a week. You've got to do stuff on your own, and you've got to have something that you're usually motivated to get back to. So for me, I also use this as a stepping stone to say, hey, this is a wake-up call. You've got to be more rigorous in your workout routines, what you do to prepare, how you treat your body. Obviously, I can see for me that my ligaments, my tendons, obviously are a lot more fragile. They need more constant, 360 types of exercises and strengthening to remain engaged and really be at full functionality. So things like that are extremely important. So, shifting back then to the doctor, I kind of said, okay, let's start out. I guess I'll try this non-surgical route. Essentially, if the doctor is recommending non-surgical, then maybe I should listen. So now, at about 3 weeks out, 3 weeks will be tomorrow, I am currently in a hard cast at the plantar flex. So essentially pointed at a pretty downward angle in order for that tendon to start to form back together. I've been told that this will be about a 6-week process of casting, and essentially they'll start down here and slowly move the angle up, and then I'll go into a boot. So that is a little bit different, I think, from some of the stories that I've heard. It seems like some people are moving into the boot a little bit quicker and kind of having, I think, the air that pumps up to keep the heel up. I guess I'm in the casting for a bit longer, so just seeing how that works. Just, I think, in terms of what's kind of been a key element for me as well is kind of figuring out how I feel like I got to this point. I don't feel like it was necessarily a sudden injury for me, and there were absolutely no signs that it happened. I just turned and boom, Achilles popped. So I think that's something, perspective that's kind of good to share as well, that I also don't see as much. A lot of the times the stories that I see are just like, hey, was playing basketball or tennis or badminton, volleyball, whatever the sport is, went to make this jump, went to make this movement, someone felt like someone stepped on me, blah, 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 whatever. But for me, although yes, that did happen, actually though, how I got here was, I think if I look back on probably within the past year, I know that I was still working out, but had started to do more cardio exercises than strengthening. So this meant more running, essentially. That was mostly the form of my cardio because, one, I could do it quickly, burn more calories, sweat easily, and that was kind of my workout routine. So I know that I was running more, and I've have seen research and information that obviously that has strain on your Achilles. I think the second factor was that I had some, good running shoes that I was using, kind of got like a second tier pair that probably really wasn't meant to be used for longer distance running. Didn't have a very supportive structure. So I started wearing shoes that were not as conducive actually for running. And I was starting to feel that my calves, my ankle area were a bit more tender. So I would just try to stretch a little bit more. Nothing, I didn't really pay attention, obviously in hindsight, to it as much as I should have. And then within the past 6 months, actually did get a better pair of shoes, but was still really only doing like running mostly and then kind of lightweight exercises. And I wasn't stretching as much. Again, now being in the working world, people are always on the go. You still want to work out. You still want to be fit. So a lot of times you'll just do, things 30, 45 minutes. I'm a morning workout person. So trying to, wake up early at 6 o'clock, do a quick 30, 40-minute workout, and then get ready to go to work. So a lot of times that also actually takes out stretching from the equation. And so I was not stretching, especially the calf muscles, as much as I should have been, which I think also played a factor in the kind of overall place where I got to as well. And then specifically, I remember on the day of the game and the injury that ended up happening June 17th, I kept saying, I feel so tight. Today I was playing more flag football. Basketball just engages different types of muscles. And I just knew I was like, something doesn't quite feel right overall. I actually, even before I left to go to the game, decided to go down to the gym and just get on the bike for 10 minutes just to kind of get the blood flowing, get my muscles kind of moving, and wanted to go early as well to make sure, I jogged, did my stretching and all that, but still knew overall, and obviously to the point where the tendon did rupture. But all that to say that sometimes there are a lot of early signs. So it's just how important it is to really listen to your body and whatever it's saying to you. Also, just to make sure you're constantly stretching before and after you work out. And, things that may be straining you or you think are minuscule right now in terms of workout routines, that may come back, eventually to result in a bigger injury. So those are just some things to be on the lookout for as well. So I just want to kind of give you my perspective, like I said, currently on where I am in the process. Of course, it's very, very frustrating. Not only just being on crutches and the inconvenience that comes with, and I have the scooter as well, but just overall knowing the rehabilitation process and how long that is going to take and the dedication that it takes as well, and knowing that, you can still get back to probably 80 to 90% strength, but with real rigor in your routine and what you choose to do. So I just really wanted to share my perspective, kind of raw feelings on where I currently am on week 3 with the injury and how I got here and what I've endured. So I hope to kind of update within the next week or two as I hope to progress to a different stage, start weight bearing soon, and actually start to do exercises that focus on the muscles, because currently I am still exercising, but really only things to kind of stay active and keep my calorie count up. So, I do sit-ups, I do some leg lifts, I do push-ups, and I do some things with resistance bands, but nothing that is, putting any type of weight on my foot, but just trying to keep my muscles engaged throughout the process. So, yes, this is kind of, like I said, my first time really sharing anything or doing a video like this. But I just wanted to kind of bring my experience and perspective. So kind of any questions or comments, I'll try to answer them as well and keep up with this. And thanks for listening.